All right, this video is on electron transport chain and oxidative phosphorylation. This is the end of the line of making ATP. Remember, cellular respiration is a three-step process, and this is the final step. So what we've created here is 5 NADH molecules and 1 FADH2 molecule. Now this is half of the equation here. So that would be following just 1 pyruvate and just before pyruvate and then after pyruvate. So this would be a total of 10 NADHs and 2 FADH2 molecules, which gives us a total count of 12 hydrogens. And remember, this is C6H12O6, so this is following glucose through the cellular respiration process. All right, so our NADH molecule, carrying the hydrogen from glucose, comes into the mitochondria, passes through both membranes, the outer mitochondrial membrane and the inner mitochondrial membrane. The NADH will hand off the hydrogen with its electron to the first protein which we will call protein number 1 on the inner membrane. And when it hands these off, they separate. The hydrogen and the electron are split apart. And the hydrogen comes off and its electron, so that I'll fold this back here, and the electron goes down all these proteins. This creates basically an electrical current. So here's our electron, the hydrogen comes off, the electron comes off the hydrogen, and the electron just moves down the chain. This creates an electrical current, which you can now do work with. And we haven't used ATP, but we can actually do work with this form of energy. And what happens is, as the electron goes down the chain, these other hydrogens that are hanging out on the inner part, now this is a proton, so this has a charge to it. It's actually H+, so it can't freely go through a membrane. These protons then, when this hydrogen moves down the line, the larger proteins will have a proton go through that protein. So NADH, when it hands off its hydrogen and electron, as this electron moves down the line, 3 hydrogens will go through these protein channels, and that's protein channel 1, 3, and 4, not number 2. So that's 3 hydrogens that have moved from the inner mitochondrial matrix, or just the mitochondrial matrix, to the inner membrane space. Here, 3 hydrogens that went through those 3 protein channels because of the movement of that electron. Now, each of these hydrogens have gone through the membrane will lead to 1 ATP molecule being made. So this one NADH molecule will lead to 3 ATP molecules being made. FADH2, on the other hand, when it comes in and hands off its hydrogen with its electron, it will do this at the second protein location. So here comes the FADH2. It's going to hand off its hydrogen and the electron, and the electron goes down the line. Same thing happens. The larger proteins will push a proton, that's just 1H, from the mitochondrial matrix to the inner membrane space. But because FADH2 does not hand off at the first protein, it hands off at the second, we will only get 2 hydrogens that go through from the mitochondrial matrix to the intermembrane space. Therefore, FADH2 will lead to 2 ATP molecules being made, slightly less than NADH. And how this happens is now we're going to have a buildup of all these hydrogens here in the intermembrane space. Now, before I continue with that, I need to tell you what's going to happen to these electrons here that are at the end of the line at protein number 4. Now, this is why oxygen is called the final electron acceptor. So oxygen will come in, that's O2, and it will collect these free electrons. And there are still hydrogens in the matrix here. And in addition, let me go ahead and move a couple of them over there. In addition to accepting these electrons, it's going to take in a couple of protons. And 2 electrons with 2 more proteins. This will convert, meaning pure oxygen, converts into water. So that oxygen that's in that water came from oxygen. The air, the component that's in the air that you breathe in. And if you don't have oxygen present, say you're holding your breath, then oxygen is not there to accept those electrons. And if that happens, this system backs up. NADH cannot hand off the electrons, and it actually will shut down Krebs cycle, the second process in cellular respiration. So then you can only get energy from glycolysis, which is not very much ATP. Certainly not enough to sustain your brain cells, your neurons. Okay, so going back to these protons, these hydrogens that are now built up in the intermembrane space, these protons, because the concentration is now built up here, meaning there's far more here than there is on the inside. These protons now are more likely to drive into the matrix just because there's a greater concentration in the intermembrane space. And lo and behold, there is a place for them to get through. This is ATP synthase. This is a protein channel that is designed to have hydrogen, the proton, move through it. And when it does, this protein enzyme here, when a proton moves through it, will take 1 ADP molecule and 1 phosphate and connect them together, making ATP. And remember, NADH will get 3 hydrogens, 1, 2, and 3, to move into the intermembrane space. And each hydrogen that goes through will go through the ATP synthase, creating 1 ATP molecule. So each NADH molecule creates 3 ATP molecules. Each FADH2 molecule will get 2 hydrogens to go through the protein channels here, thereby creating 2 ATP molecules. And remember, we have a total of 10 NADH molecules from all of cellular respiration. 10 times 3 is 30 ATP molecules, and FADH2, each one will create 2 ATP molecules. That gives us a total of about 34 ATP molecules. And if you add in the 2 that you had to subtract out, the number does vary. Part of that is because getting FADH2 through the inner membrane could take ATP to move it through, thereby lowering your total count. And that is it for cellular respiration.